It's been 4 weeks since I played Spider-Man Remaster with the lewd mods for each female character while playing with one hand. It's also been 4 weeks since I made a video rewriting Spider-Man 2's story, focusing on the biggest and even the smallest points that anyone could consider a missed opportunity. So this time around, I've decided to pre-write Marvel's Spider-Man 3 a whole 3 years before it even comes out. I'm mostly doing this because I want the best for this game's story, as it's one of the main things that made the first game so great to begin with. And I don't trust Insomniac to do the job since they were the same ones who fumbled the 2 sequels. In terms of story, not gameplay. It was also good for my view count, so I might as well do it again. Sorry bro, I'm just being honest here. Now due to this video focusing on a pre-write instead of a rewrite, I'll be doing things differently this time. Basically coming up with a story from scratch, using all the characters, themes, and plotlines that were already introduced as a starting point. Of course I want to clarify that I'm exclusively talking about my rewrite of this game and not the original, as I firmly believe that my rewrite is a lot better than the original in almost every aspect in terms of story. Click on the white card popping up right now if you want more context on it. And now that we got that out of the way, allow me to give you my pre-write of Marvel's Spider-Man 3. But first, I'd like to bring your attention to the shameless plugging I'm about to do here. Click this timestamp to skip it. I'm currently working on a fan comic of Spider-Man right now. It's titled The Unstoppable Spider-Man, and the first 3 pages will be released on DeviantArt on August 24th. I'm mentioning this because I give out weekly updates in both my YouTube shorts and my Patreon. So if you want to stay up to date on it, be sure to subscribe to my channel and check out my Patreon. Alright, ads over. Time to get into my pre-write for Marvel's Spider-Man 3. Peter and MJ have had some rocky times in their relationship, comics not included, but this time around, I want to make things right by the two, starting with Peter continuing his break from being Spider-Man. He helps MJ produce her new YouTube channel after deciding that podcasts don't really have the best reputation. He builds her setup, gives some pointers on certain topics, and is just a supportive household husband that suits his lifestyle way more than having an actual job ever would. For the majority of the first act in the game, we'll see Peter and MJ from a much more grounded perspective, still reeling from the death of their best friend Harry. They try to make each other feel better, and no, that's not what I'm referring to. What I mean is that we'll get a similar dynamic to Miles and Gwen from Across the Spider-Verse, where these two will have a good slice of life romance, trying to continue their lives without Spider-Man, putting a new spin on the Spider-Man No More storyline. Of course, by the second act, due to some major villain appearances, he'll come back as Spider-Man for the rest of the game, and by the end, Peter will try to propose to MJ, but falters as he's unconfident in her saying yes, remembering every grievance she mentioned when she was Venom. I think it's best to save the whole will they, won't they drama for other adaptations, and focus on how much these two actually care about each other. After all, despite what modern readers and fans will tell you, MJ is Peter's best love interest, and I want to make this pre-write story highlight that fact. On another note, Miles should be the one teaching Cindy Moon on how to be Spider-Man in this game, and not Peter. It would be a very interesting parallel to Peter's teaching style in the first 2 games, and would further cement how different these two Spider-Man are. I also think making Cindy the antisocial type would work as well, considering the fact that she was pretty much kept in solidarity for a good portion of her life. Her introduction to Miles and Peter should definitely be during the first act, where she helps Miles stop a small-time villain like the Beetle, using the organic webbing from her fingertips to web up the Beetle in the air just like an actual spider. Miles as Spider-Man will then introduce himself and take her to Peter, who will tell Miles to teach her just like how he taught Miles. Having the teacher-student relationship between Miles and Cindy be somewhat abrasive up to the second act of the game would definitely be the best thing for both of these characters. It allows Cindy to further develop and express the flaws of her character so that we can see in real time how she becomes a better person through Miles' influence. And Miles can benefit by applying what he learned about being both Miles and Spider-Man from the last game's rewrite. After his exit in the Spider-Man 2 side story, Cletus returns, now fully manic and psychotic as Carnage. He'll first appear through the Spider-Man app, causing havoc in people's neighborhoods. Miles will lose his first fight against Carnage, as Cletus is more brutal and dangerously creative with the symbiote than MJ was with Venom, and will escape, leaving Miles to regroup with Cindy. Yuri Watanabe will also appear during this point in the story, and will try to be the bad cop to Miles' good cop in regards to Cletus' fate. Miles will try to appeal to her former past as a cop, citing her time with Peter as a reason to change, but Yuri will deny him, telling him the same thing that she told Peter.
The system works most of the time, but there are times when it doesn't, and to me that's unacceptable. Some people put their trust in fate, or karma, or whatever, but I can only trust me.
Carnage will end up being the big bad during the second act, and will fight both Miles and Cindy, and eventually Peter, who shows up during the last part of the fight after having flashbacks of what the symbiote did to MJ. Having the three defeat Carnage together will be a nice resolution to the plotline between Miles and Cindy, and would be a great way to let Peter prove to Yuri that the system does work if you never give up on it. And with the two bringing Cletus to justice, Yuri will decide not to turn herself in, but return as a cop, as the evidence of her killing anyone doesn't really hold up and she gets away with it. It's not uncommon for Spider-Man to let criminals get away with their actions, so I think having Peter do it this time with a person whom he knows to be an actual good guy who just lost their way for a bit would be a nice idea. Throughout the entire first two acts, there will be reports of mysterious robberies related to hospitals, where the thief is stealing nothing but the bags of blood. Miles will send in Cindy to find more clues on the thief and hopefully catch them, as it'll help her learn important skills. But Cindy will eventually taper off in this little mission to help Miles in stopping Carnage. I'm doing this because I think it's interesting when a story introduces a side plot only to then get reintroduced with a twist that has a lot of weight to it on the characters involved. Case in point, Dr. Morgan Michaels. Dr. Michaels was theorized to be Morbius the living vampire due to his actual name being one of his famous aliases. I honestly think he would be a great villain to introduce to this series, so I plan to do that by having him get caught by Peter, who decided to get back into the game of being Spider-Man after stopping Carnage. The two will fight in the hospital, and by the end of it, Peter will slowly put two and two together and figure out Morbius is Dr. Michaels. After this, Morgan's story can be pretty self-explanatory. The spiders will regroup, come up with a plan to stop Morbius, the four will fight until one of the three spiders pull out their plot armor and beat him. Like I said, pretty self-explanatory. Fun fact, when I originally wrote this part of the video, I was gonna include a detail that would make Norman the cause of Dr. Michaels becoming Morbius, but I scrapped it when I realized just how many villains have been created because of him. And while I get that it's only two, I still don't want to continue with the repetition, although the one loophole would have to be the universe where Norman figures out Dr. Michaels' real identity and bribes him with an endless supply of blood in exchange for tormenting/killing the spiders, as part of the revenge he promised his dead son in my rewrite. And now that I think about it, that's actually a better idea than everything I said earlier, so do me a favor and pretend that whatever I said about Morbius before this timestamp doesn't exist. While we're on the topic of Norman Osborn's revenge, Norman spends the entire first two acts making the lives of Spider-Man feel like hell. He'll fund drones and several other devices to inhibit Spider-Man and Silk from swinging into the city, send in Taskmaster as a mercenary, and Morbius just for good measure, and will try to fund J. Jonah's podcast, as well as other hate campaigns against Spider-Man. Of course, J. Jonah won't take that money, considering that he values his integrity over a fat stack of cash. Back to Norman Osborn, Norman will see his smear campaign not working too well, and after his failed attempts with the drones, the mercenary, and Morbius, he'll use the G-Serum to take revenge on the spiders himself, utilizing the armory that was already introduced in the first game. Norman Osborn will make his first appearance as the Green Goblin sometime after Peter defeats Morbius, and it will be the fight that kicks off the third act of the game. During this fight, Norman will damage Peter's mask enough to make out his face. Norman will then unmask himself and fly away, while Peter will swing away, realizing who the Green Goblin is. I want this moment between the two to have the same weight as Doc Ock revealing himself in the first game, as we've seen Norman Osborn lose his sanity gradually throughout the course of this game, the death of his son Harry being the catalyst to that, with the G-Serum only amplifying it, as I kind of always disliked how the G-Serum was used as a plot device to explain how Norman goes crazy, when in reality, it would be a whole lot better for the character if Norman had his own agency when losing his marbles. After Norman escapes, he'll have a mental breakdown and will go after Peter at his home, with Miles and Cindy already going there due to Peter telling them to. Peter will swing by his home, still in costume as MJ and Gwen Stacy. Don't worry, we'll get to her in a bit. Still catch up over coffee. Peter will be mildly injured, as MJ will care for his wounds, while Gwen still remains shocked at who Peter really is. She'll still help, of course, and promises to keep it a secret. The Green Goblin will then appear by blowing up the front door, in an attempt to kidnap MJ, but ends up grabbing Gwen instead, as she pushes MJ away. I'll then have Green Goblin mog the shit out of Peter, and tell him that he's gonna take everything Peter loves, starting with Gwen. Alright, now it's time for the section of the video that made up 1/3 of the thumbnail. Gwen Stacy as a character is a massive part of Spider-Man's story, whether she's the love interest that he leaves hanging, or the punk rock girl who doesn't have jungle fever. And while she's mostly portrayed as a love interest for Peter Parker, I don't want her to be for this adaptation. I want her to be a platonic friend to Peter, MJ, and Harry when they met in college, who later reconnects with MJ in the first act of the story, revealing her profession as a model. We'll have some flashbacks of Gwen Stacy back when she met them in college, using the pain she had when her dad Captain Stacy died to make a better environment for not just the community, but also her school, making her death all the more tragic as she'll die during Norman and Peter's battle once Pete catches up to him. Of course it'll be at the top of the clock tower, and their final fight will be brutal as hell, with Peter almost killing Norman until Miles and Cindy stop him. Norman will then pull a similar move to the Green Goblin and Spectacular Spider-Man and will try to blow up everyone there, including himself. Of course, everyone will swing away, and Peter will cry at the death of Gwen Stacy, realizing that history just repeated itself from Harry. I know several people in the comments are gonna get ticked off by the fact that Peter and Gwen aren't romantically involved, but the reason I do that is because I want to take a different approach to the character. Far too often we see female characters like Gwen Stacy become just a love interest to either Peter or another Spider-Man, where she'll ultimately be used as a plot device who is expected to die and nothing more. And while that can still be good, it just gets repetitive after a while. So I want to do things differently this time. I want Norman and Gwen's funeral to be one of the final scenes in the game. As in a similar scene to the first game, Norman's tombstone is right next to his late wife and son, while Gwen is next to her father. Miles can have a scene of him going off to college to complete another term, since he was on a summer break throughout the story, while Cindy continues to be Silk, hoping that wherever her family is, that she makes them proud, along with her current one. Being a corporation, Ocsorp will be held under new management, the new leader being Alistair Smythe, who will take an interest in the Spider Trio and their powers. Throughout the game, whether you're playing as Peter, Miles, Cindy, or God forbid MJ, you'll be seeing several changes being made to the city. Kingpin's men will become more and more frequent in terms of crimes, his construction sites will become active again, and one of the side stories for Miles will involve him apprehending Wilson's men after they were selling drugs through a shady program. The final main story mission will involve Peter swinging throughout the city, as Yuri tells him that Kingpin is back and is currently controlling his forces from inside the prison. Yuri would have come to this conclusion by analyzing all the evidence Miles gave her from his side mission and from doing her own due diligence as Wraith. She tells Peter the various locations of Kingpin hideouts throughout the city, as well as their supply bases, and in the same fashion as the original PS4 game, everything comes full circle as Peter swings throughout the city, ready to crack down on these hideouts, until Yuri mentions something else, that someone from the raft wants to see him, and reveals their name to be Otto Octavius. Peter will then decide to take care of this first, and swings over to the raft. At the raft, Spider-Man walks to the cell of Otto Octavius, and the two share a conversation about Otto's actions, with Otto thanking Peter for Norman's death. But Peter tries to use it as a reason for Otto to come back, and be the man he used to be, as he has no reason to be evil anymore. But Otto then stops him, telling him that he has every reason, as Peter still turned on him when he was at his lowest point. A sudden explosion will then occur, causing Spider-Man to leap away from the danger. Peter will then question if that was Otto's idea, but Otto will reveal that it was only a distraction from Peter's spider sense, as two small robots will then strike them both at the same time, swapping their minds. And as the guards show up, Peter will panic as he realizes he's trapped in Otto's body, while Otto goes to leave, telling Peter that he will no longer betray anyone ever again. He'll then swing away and back into New York City as Peter screams while controlling Otto's body. I've seen lots of posts on Reddit about Insomniac covering the Superior Spider-Man storyline, so I thought it'd be a fun challenge to introduce it in the ending to the final game, and then have the DLC for it be the actual conclusion to not just the storyline, but the entire franchise as a whole. In the DLC, the Superior Spider-Man storyline will run its course for the same runtime as Spider-Man Miles Morales, mostly since I don't want this story to feel rushed due to having a shorter runtime, and I doubt the fans that buy this game will dislike the fact that they get 18 to 20 hours worth of content. Of course, there will be major readjustments to the storyline, the first being that the story itself will take place over the span of a week, and will kick off with Otto swinging through the city after he swapped bodies with Peter Parker. He'll get sudden flashbacks throughout the story, revealing more and more of Peter's past as Spider-Man, making Otto want to be a better Spider-Man just to spite Peter. The second major change is that MJ, Miles, Cindy will figure it out within the first 3 days. Mary Jane makes sense because she's practically been with Pete for years at this point, and would more than likely be the first one to realize when something is wrong with him, especially when he starts dressing like this. Miles and Cindy will figure it out pretty quickly as well, considering how ruthless Otto becomes in Peter's body, as well as how selfish he acts. The third and final change is the final act of the Superior Spider-Man storyline. In the comic, the story ends with Peter getting his body back after Otto decides that he's not as superior as he thought, since Norman was able to make a Goblin army right from under his nose. But in this game, I want to take a more personal approach, having Otto and Peter's body meet up with Peter and Otto's body within the raft, where the two will have a conversation about their lives, their losses, and responsibility, where Otto will learn the real value of the phrase, "with great power comes great responsibility," apologizing for everything he's done as Doc Ock, as well as letting his mind get corrupted by the interface. Otto will then use the small robots from before to swap their their bodies back. Peter will then wake up in his own body again, as Otto says that he will serve his time in the raft, and that if Peter, Miles, or Cindy need any help as Spider-Man, Otto will pitch in. Peter will then swing away, as MJ, Miles, Cindy, and Yuri are glad to have him back to normal, and the final swing will be of Peter, Miles, and Cindy. I wanted this storyline to be a final send-off to the series, as it highlights the best part about Spider-Man, that being not just the responsibility, but the understanding of that responsibility. In Marvel's Spider-Man 2, there was a cutscene between Delilah from Across the Spider-Verse and whichever Spider-Man you were playing as. This cutscene was a pretty cool Easter egg, and probably would have been a good setup for that Spider-Verse tie-in game if it hadn't been cancelled. So I want to recreate that for this game, since Beyond the Spider-Verse is still on the horizon. The cutscene can be simple and have Peter, Miles, and Cindy all meet up somewhere so they can portal themselves to stop the Spot sometime after he starts his rampage in Earth 1610. It'll make for a fun Easter egg and wouldn't really spoil too much of the movie's plot. Alright, time for my final thoughts. I am? Alright, as for the side stories, I think giving each Spider-Man and woman their own set of unique side stories tied to the city would be the best thing to do here. Peter should be given more personal side stories like the kid who collects Spider-Man or origin of the Hobgoblin, while Miles can be given more community-based side stories and Cindy can have the citywide threats. You know, to prove that she's a strong and independent woman. The kid who collects Spider-Man was done pretty poorly in Spider-Man Lotus, so I think giving that storyline a second chance would be a good idea, especially if it's told from the perspective of the child, as it would keep the twist factor that made the story so good, and has already been done with the Haley side mission. Origin of the Hobgoblin would work, since it'll introduce another antagonist into the already depleted arsenal of remaining villains in this Spider-Man's rogues gallery. Of course, there also has to be a side mission with Peter and Yuri, just to further hammer home how different their relationship is when you compare it to the first game. I think small-time villains like White Rabbit, Pandemania, Swarm, and Hippo would make the perfect catalyst for this. I also think adapting Spider-Man Blue would work as well, although it would need to be greatly adjusted to actually work in this Prewrite. So instead of the side story focusing on Peter and Gwen's romance, it could focus on how much Gwen did for her family and her community, even after facing hardships like her dad dying. And one of the people that would take her death the hardest will be James Warren, who finds out about her death at the hands of the Green Goblin. But due to his poor mental health and deep infatuation with Gwen Stacy, this causes him to blame Spider-Man for her death. And in the side story, Warren becomes the Jackal to fight Spider-Man, using the reason that he wants to make him bleed. And during their fight, Peter does just that, but ultimately ends up beating the Jackal, and for the most part, it looks like the story ends there, until Jackal reveals that he stole a sample of Peter's blood, and vows that when he escapes the raft, he's going to make his life as miserable as he can. In terms of community-based side stories, I think storylines similar to the Cultural Museum would work best here, with one of them including his comic book villain, Rabble. I won't go too deep into their history due to how long this video currently is, so I'll just link Shine Comics' video on it. Rabble, or Raneem Rashad in this continuity, can be a person that has been screwed over by the system, whether it be family-related hospital bills, or just not getting into the best school and having to deal with the scraps of the lower class. Having her be a villain who takes out her anger on society due to her lack of power in it could make for an interesting story, and would actually be a great contrast when you compare her to Cindy Moon. And then when Miles as Spider-Man stops her, she decides to exclusively target him instead, since Spider-Man as a character, at least from her perspective, is someone that's almost immune to any consequence society could have on him.
Longtime caller Officer Andrews is back with us. As always, thank you for your service to our fair city, officer. What's new?
Mr. Jameson, you know I'm a fan, but I just saw Spider-Man in action. I worked with him to stop Wilson Fisk's men from stealing back their hard drives, and he's a stand-up guy.
Now wait a second, my friend, I'm not questioning your word. I'm sure what you said happened. But have you considered it was in Spider-Man's interest to help you?
How so?
He obviously had a long-standing feud with Fisk and wants him put away. That doesn't make him Mother Teresa. It just means he had a grudge.
Look, I hear you, but why can't we give him the benefit of the doubt?
Why? Because he hides behind that mask. You trained. You stand up with your badge and name tag on and you do your job every day. He runs and hides. If you cause the kind of damage he does, what would happen?
I'd be doing paperwork until the day I retire, and probably riding a desk, too.
And why, my dear friend, should you have to follow these rules and not him?
You know, that's a damn good point.
I knew you'd come around.
I want Raneem's reasons for being a villain to not be because of Norman Osborn, but something that is very inevitable for society, in which a bad situation creates a bad person. A story as old as time, but for good reason because it works when you do it well. As for Cindy, I think giving her bigger scale threats like Kindred or natural disasters would make for some great character building for her as a Spider-Woman. It'll slowly introduce her own unique rogues gallery, as well as help her as a character who has the power to run on walls, but still has to deal with things like earthquakes or floods. And now that I've tackled all the points I wanted to cover, it's time for me to get into my final thoughts. Overall, I think I did a pretty good job when it came to making the final conclusion to this video game series. As I said before in my last video, Spider-Man has and always will be my favorite superhero, and making this video has definitely made me love his character and his entire mythos even more. And while I may not like how Insomniac makes certain character models, or how they include certain missions in the story, one thing I can count on is them actually telling a good story. I hope they create a game better than Marvel's Spider-Man 2, and a story that's even better than this pre-write.